our next storyteller making his VAMP debut, it's Stuart Jacobson.
This is wonderful. Good evening, everybody. Puberty was perplexing for me. Now, the hardest part, pardon the pun, was that I would get spontaneous erections at the drop of a hat. Back then, I found that I was very often, totally mortified that I would pop a boner as I stood in front of the classroom, or worse, in the locker room. So I went for guidance to my sex education faculty, namely 3 guys who hung out in the alleyway behind my house on 77th Road. This was, I guess, or still is, a gritty part of Queens, known as Kew Garden Hills, which had no gardens, no hills, and nobody knew or ever thought about what Kew might mean. And this photo doesn't lie. It was always cold in those days. What Simon and Garfunkel, who grew up nearby, termed a hazy shade of winter. These guys, Ronnie Rosenberg, Saul Corrine, and Phil Caruso, were a couple of years older than me. This conferred upon them status as sexual elder statesmen, or what a literary person would term eminence grise. Or more realistically, they once got to third base. I asked them about the best way to forestall a spontaneous erection. Maybe not using those words. More likely, I would have said something like, "I'm getting these boners all the time, and I want to be able sometimes to stop them from happening." Ronnie said, "I don't know. Think of a plane crash. Maybe, a disaster." Phil added, "You want a disaster? Think about the Mets." "Yeah, that'll work. That'll work for sure, but maybe work too good. You might never get a boner again." But Saul had the last word. "Stuart, you want to kill your heart on? Then this is what you do. You visualize 3 things: hospitals, deathbeds, ambulances." At this note of sagacious wisdom, Ronnie and Phil agreed. Now, I've always been a good student. I took Saul's advice to heart, and it worked well, really well. Can you imagine a more sexless photo of an otherwise healthy teenager? Let's fast forward now about 15 years or so. I was, and still am, married to a wonderful, patient woman who had graduated from medical school and decided she wanted to be a brain surgeon. In fact, she succeeded in this endeavor and became known as a talented practitioner with skilled hands who could be counted upon to provide a positive outcome. But at this point, she was starting a grueling 7-year residency program, the first year being a surgical internship. The second year for her was to be dedicated to research. The purpose of this was that if she had wanted to have an academic career, she could establish herself as a clinical investigator and carve out a niche for herself with a bunch of publications. She wasn't interested in this. She wanted just to treat patients and their tumors, strokes, accidents, and gunshot wounds. Basically, she wanted to cut, scoop, and sew. We regarded this research year as basically 12 months of extended paid leave, and we saw it as a great time to start a family, especially knowing that the subsequent years would be onerously difficult. We looked at the calendar and concluded that with her schedule as an intern, the best time to plan for delivery would be September of that research year. We decided we would shoot for our September baby, or more precisely, I would shoot and she would aim for that blessed event. You must understand that my wife is a compulsively meticulous person. This is a trait that can sometimes be infuriating, but nonetheless something that you want in your brain surgeon. And she did everything she could to determine the date and time of ovulation so that conception would occur. She regularly took her temperature. She went to a gynecologist. She paid a visit to a psychic. She studied the cycles of the moon, and, as rumor had it, made a surreptitious visit to a poultry slaughterhouse to study chicken entrails, as the ancient Roman soothsayers had done. And when, at that golden moment of ovulation was about to take place, She was in the middle of a 48-hour in-hospital shift. She called me at 1 in the morning and said, "Stuart, get over here right away." She added that she got hold of a bed in a private room, and both the availability of the bed and, just as important, fertility had a very narrow window. And by the way, I should park by the entrance to the emergency room. The ER parking lot, that's where the ambulances are. We have a doctor's parking permit, otherwise you have to pay or you can get towed away. I, ever the dutiful and supportive spouse, drove to the hospital and parked by the emergency room. I did my best to overlook the ambulances, but when one sped out past me, lights flashing, siren blaring, I couldn't help recalling Ronnie, Saul, and Phil's advice. But I soldiered on. I found her, and we walked down a long corridor to the private room. I tried, likely in vain, to eroticize this, situating ourselves in a private club on the way to a sex den. But this mood was killed as orderlies wheeled patients by on gurneys, going, I didn't want to know where. On the way there, more than one nurse made eye contact with me, giving me a knowing smile. I felt an oncoming dread, a sense of shame, much like the shame I wanted to avoid all those years ago. I had then tried so hard not to be publicly identified as a sexual, read horny, being, that now, at horniness' most appropriate moment, I was beginning to feel conflicted. As we entered the room, I did a quick assessment of the fuck-friendliness of the room. You know how the atmosphere and furnishings enhance the conduciveness for the sex act to take place? A honeymoon suite, this wasn't. I looked at the bed. The mattress was thin, it was narrow, and there were railings. I think we're gonna have to do this doggy style. My wife said, I'm not taking any chances, I have to be in the bottom. Gravity. We sat down in the bed, and it was warm. I said to her, why is this bed warm? She, in her characteristic, guileless, matter-of-fact manner, indicated that the previous patient had just, about a half hour or so ago, passed away. I gave her a puzzled and desperately confused look. Although I never told her about my back alley schooling, she sensed some unease and said, get real, this is a hospital. People either get better or they die. Yeah. Though my wife was on her way to becoming a talented practitioner with skilled hands who could be counted on to provide a positive outcome, her bedside manner had a lot to be desired. Yet she did recognize that this might not have been the most provident thing to say, and it dawned on her that something was up, or that something might not soon be up. She paused for a beat. You know, I was wrong. He had a miraculous recovery, and now he's with his wife and family in Disneyland. Before I was able to react, she added that she's got to talk to somebody down the hall. She got up to leave, and as she was walking out the door, she looked back at me and instructed me to get started. I'm sitting there thinking, how am I going to unlearn what I learned so well? What would Ronnie, Saul, and Phil do? Then I thought, I know why I'm here. My wife and I love each other. We know what we're doing. And if we do it long and we do it slow and right, we'll get the deed done. This was encouraging, and it helped me lift my spirits a little bit. The juices were beginning to flow, my balls were moving. Then my wife burst into the room without knocking and said, they need this room right away, we gotta hurry. I felt that my bubble was about to burst, or rather go flaccid from a slow leak. I panicked. I looked around, metaphorically seeking support or inspiration, but I saw nothing more than a dimly lit room, a TV fixed to one channel, and fortunately my wife. I saw two dissonant sides of her, my emotional security blanket and the bestower of sexual favors, the soothing and the stimulating. Boy, I needed help. This was not what I had planned, but when you put yourself at the disposal of a talented practitioner with skilled hands to be counted on to provide a positive outcome, good things can happen. Now that I'm staring directly in the face of senescence, I find myself looking wistfully back at those times, regarding them as having been the glory days. I wish that I could reconnect with Ronnie, Saul, and Phil, who, if they are still alive, continue to be a couple years older than me, and ask them for guidance on dealing both with my regrets and on feeling comfortable with getting old, and I also want to find out where to score Viagra at a good price. And yes, 9 months later, we got our September baby. And a generation later, he had his own September baby. I didn't ask if it was planned. Over the years, I've had to go to the ER for myself or others, generally for non-serious emergencies. Whenever I do go to one, though, I finally got a spontaneous erection. And at my age, this ain't so bad. Thank you.